Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Root, and I am an alcoholic. God separated me from alcohol January 7th of 2008, and for that I am eternally grateful. I want to thank Nicole for asking, where'd you go? For asking me to be here this evening at such a wonderful group. She told me a little bit about the history. We were guessing that the group has been perhaps around for 30 years. We were just 30 years plus. So I'm honored to be with y'all tonight. I live in a town just about an hour and a half away from here. A little town, you guys probably haven't heard of it, called Austin. I have a home group. My home group is the Primary Purpose Group in Austin, Texas. We meet Tuesday nights at 7:30. If you're ever in town and you want to come study the book line by line with us, we'd love to have you come. We are kind of big book technicians. We're a little nerdy with it, so if that's how you get down, please come. I do have a sponsor. His name is Chad P. His home group is the Primary Purpose Group, Wednesday nights online. Started during COVID. From what I can tell, there's people from all around the world who tune in. So it's a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. Some big book technicians in there as well. Of course, I'm an unapologetic big book guy. I make no bones about that the clear-cut, precise instructions contained in this book are cuts a path for me to have a spiritual experience. And in the midst of that spiritual experience, what I do is I get to remove the things that keep me blocked off from you and keep me blocked off from God. And as a result of that, I get to treat the true condition of my alcoholism, which is my spiritual condition. And what I find is that when I'm in the midst of God and I'm in the midst of trying to figure out how to serve other alcoholics, that self-importance goes down and God importance goes up. And so I get this effect produced. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a real alcoholic. I took my first drink at the age of 9. Looking back at my story, I think I should have had my first drink at the age of 6. I don't know, maybe like some of y'all, I was a kid that was just always in trouble. Have any troublemakers in the audience tonight? Yeah, always in the midst of some kind of jackpot that I got myself in. And I had a positive genius for bringing anyone who was foolish enough to walk around with me right in the midst of that big pot of trouble. And so, I grew up in Littleton, Colorado, and I come from a family. I was adopted. I don't come from an adopted family of alcoholics, but biologically I come from a long line of alcoholics. In fact, 4th generation alcoholic. I do believe that alcoholism is a genetic bullet that you catch. But I'm also a person who believes you have to have drank alcohol to have alcoholism. So I grew up in a little town, and we had this sweet little setup. It was like a cul-de-sac, and you could walk to school, and it was kind of an Ozzie and Harriet type situation. But I always felt like I didn't fit in. I don't know, maybe you guys can relate. There was something different about me. I had a pretty big sign on my back. At least I thought everyone was always pointing out to the fact that I was adopted. And that got me a lot of miles down the road. I used that little story, and that separated me from the rest of the kids and separated me from my family. And that sense of separation, that inability to connect with other people. In the basement of my parents' home when I was 9 years old, I always had associated alcohol with a good time. The adults in my life, when they drank alcohol or had libations around, it was a good time. They like to pull you close and give you a little cuddle and tell you a dirty little joke. Give you a little noogie on your head, So in my mind, man, it was like when alcohol was present, all the adults seemed relaxed and in a good mood. And so I'm in the basement, and I see this giant 3-gallon bottle of sangria. Anyone remember sangria? Oh, yeah. So syrupy, you can barely pour it out of the bottle, right? But for some reason, I saw that sweat just kind of glistening down the side of that bottle and that sweet little gold twist-off cap. And I opened that thing up and smelled it, and it just smelled like heaven to me. And I took 3 big pulls off that giant bottle of wine, and that warmth rose from my stomach and into my chest and then into my head. And for the first time in my known memory, I had a feeling like I belonged. That room came into focus, and my friends were my best friends. They were my best friends, but even better friends. And I just felt that tension and that anxiety and that constant fear of separation, that I didn't really fit in, you didn't understand me, just kind of fall off of me. And I formed a secret with myself that I wouldn't learn until many years later. But the secret was that I did not want to be in my own skin unless I could get loaded. And so I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that I drank a gallon of vodka from the age of 9 until I was 22 when I got to my first treatment center. But I will tell you that I never turned down an opportunity to get it loaded from the age of 9 until I checked into my first treatment center at 22. I never said, wow, it's really not a good idea. my mother's sick, I maybe shouldn't get drunk. Or I never said it's my dad's birthday, it'd be a really bad idea if I came home loaded. I did not have the ability to control the amount of alcohol once I put it in my body. So at the age of 9, although I didn't know it, the effect that alcohol produced for me at the time was ease and comfort. And to a guy like me who desperately wanted to connect and desperately wanted to fit in, that was what I was looking for, man. I was looking for some ease and comfort in my skin. And so, I don't know, maybe like many of y'all, I didn't have a ton of consequences when I first started drinking alcohol. Alcohol was an exciting, exhilarating part of my life, even at a young age. And any opportunity I had to involve alcohol in whatever situation, I would do so. But I don't know, maybe you guys can relate. I was in a family that my father worked in the oil business, and so I was at the age of 10, and we started to get transferred around a lot. So we went from Denver, Colorado to Midland, Texas. And I remember life kind of took on a different meaning for me. It was from the Rocky Mountains to the Permian Basin, right? So we went from the Rocky Mountains to tumbleweeds and horny toads. And it's kind of an interesting experience. Bunch of kids drinking Big Red. I don't like Big Red, never had. It's like drinking bubble gum in a cup, but everyone talked like this, and their name's Mitch, and they're from Midland, Texas. And so, which I never had heard that kind of talk. At first, I didn't really understand what Texans sound like, but I caught on pretty quick. And so, I don't know, maybe like you guys, the book kind of describes the experience of a hard drinker. And I had that experience early on when I was about 11 years old. You see, I had a change of environment. But for me, I'm a real alcoholic, and every example that a hard drinker gets that he might be able to control, stop, or moderate his drinking, I find those to be drinking occasions for the alcoholic. So for instance, when I change my environment, the one way that I know I can fit in is I find a group of kids who like to drink alcohol. And I associated myself with these type of kids, and they didn't like to follow the rules, and they didn't really respect authority. And although my father was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, I was hard against any kind of rules. Anyone, a bunch of followers in here? I'm a pretty hardcore line pusher, certified line pusher. You put a line in front of me, you say, Stephen, don't cross that line, and I push that line. And then you put another line in front of me, and I'm going to push that line. Deeply defiant, part of my characteristic. I never really did enjoy being told what to do. And I think that's why I first had an experience with an AA meeting at the age of 13. And by the time I made my first AA meeting at the age of 13, I didn't really feel like I fit in. I surrounded myself, and from this time, we were from Midland, Texas, we go to Anchorage, Alaska. So now from the Permian Basin to the Brooks Mountain Range, right? And pretty cool place to grow up. But again, don't really feel like I fit in, need to find my crew, and there they are. They're the kids who are skipping school and drinking Everclear out of hairspray bottles and cutting class and breaking all the rules, and man, these are my people. And so alcohol, again, was the unifying force between myself and the way that I connected to other people. And I did never shy away from an excuse to get drunk, and this time, consequences start catching up with me around the age of 14 or 15. I don't know if you guys ever did this. Did you guys ever borrow a car that wasn't yours? Yeah, kind of take that car out for a little spin. Maybe you didn't really know how to drive too well, and you've been drinking. Maybe you crashed that car into something. Happened a couple times to me and my buddies. And I don't know, my parents seemed to have a knack for not really wanting to dig too deep into what the issue was. But they wanted to send me to other places. And y'all, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you my parents didn't teach me right from wrong. I came from a good family. These parents taught me good values. I grew up in a nice, respectable home. But at some point, my parents decided that they couldn't reach me. And I don't know, maybe y'all have had this experience. They sent me to a lot of really good, well-intentioned people, psychiatrists, psychologists. They wanted to prescribe medications to perhaps deal with my full flight from reality, my outright mental defectiveness, right? I had a positive knack for not really finding a way to listen to people. I could kind of shut people off. And so there were a lot of really well-intentioned people, but I don't know, maybe for like y'all, these people kept telling me what to do and how to do it. And again, this deep defiance that I have, this really crazy ability I have to walk right up to a degree of change and then turn right back around and go doing the same thing I've been doing. And there's so many examples of me in life being right up against the hopes of an entire change in my life or my perspective, and I go right back to using the same old ideas that took me to that place where I couldn't change. And so right around the time I was 16, 17 years old, we started getting into a lot of trouble with alcohol, and the consequences started ramping up. And so I made my second AA meeting at the age of 17. And right around the time alcohol started to catch up with us, well, it was time to move again. So I was happy about that. So now we're in Plano, Texas, and we show up, and it's my senior year of high school. And yet again, I sniff them out. I can smell out the really crazy sick people in a room. Just let my nose get going, I can sniff them out. So end up with a group of guys in Plano, Texas. And at that time, I started, alcohol has always been my primary way in which I find connectivity to other people. But at this time, people started, I was already at the age of 17 a shivering denizen in the realm of King Alcohol. But at the age of 17, I started having opportunities to wander into other realms, if you catch my drift, with equally powerful kings. And in those realms, I began to experiment with various substances. Substances that aren't sold in stores. Substances that are sold in places that are a little dangerous, a little racy. So as I kind of wandered into those other realms, those problems that I had with alcohol, they ramped up. And so at the age of 17, if you want to just draw a line as to how my life is going, you just find me at 17 with my drink in my hand, and you just draw a line straight down until I'm 22 years old. And got out of high school and moved back to Alaska, surrounded myself with a bunch of people that had a little deeper disappreciation for the law. These guys I like to call my crew. Many of them ended up dead before they were 25 years old, and many of them ended up with life sentences in prison. And these are the kind of guys that I separated, that I found myself attracted to. And, you know, at this time, I feel like I had started to kind of live out this vicious cycle that Dr. Silkworth talks about, is that I initially stepped to alcohol and I found ease and comfort. But at some point, I crossed an invisible line, about the age of maybe 15, 16 years old. And drinking wasn't, I wasn't drinking to escape. I was drinking to overcome a craving beyond my mental control. I simply did not have the ability to control the amount of alcohol once I started to drink. And as the consequences started to ramp up and my cohorts began to experience more serious consequences, I found myself going into 3 or 4 day blackouts and coming out of a 3 or 4 day blackout and waking up. At one point, I know I came out of a blackout, just to qualify myself a little bit. We started off in South Padre Island, and I know I woke up on a beach in Mexico with a Speedo and a Burger King crown on my head doing a beer bong, and the sun was coming up, and I had no idea who these people were, how I got there, where the Speedo came from, how we got to Burger King. No idea how this happened. And it's wild to try and walk back across the border with no shoes on, wearing nothing but a Speedo and a Burger King crown, but I did that. And I oftentimes think about Dr. Bob and some of these old timers, and they kind of get to the point where they're starting to make amends. And I'm a little envious of these guys, because Dr. Bob did all his drinking and all of his amends in one town. But my alcohol had taken me from Denver to Midland to Alaska to Dallas to Houston to Huntsville and all around. And by the time I was looking at these 9-step amends a few years later, I had a lot of traveling to do. But, you know, I wasn't quite ready to admit I was an alcoholic, but for the first time when I was 22 years old, I was dating a girl. We lived in a log cabin out in Huntsville, Texas. I went to college under the auspice that I was going to get an education, but what I really studied was $2 pitch a night at the 17th Street Bar. That was my major, right? I had a minor in other outside activities, non-conference approved literature there. So I'm dating this girl, and she lives in a log cabin, and one day I came home from my job at Max Superstop. I didn't want to get a job that interfered with my drinking. You can understand, right? I had pretty low standards. I had a pretty low belief system. I was one of these guys that believed I really wasn't worth much, and life wasn't really going to go any kind of different way, and I kept crossing lines I'd never cross, and I kept crossing values that I said I would never go against. And by the time I'm 22 years old, I get home to my girlfriend's house, and she takes me in the house, and she showed me a calendar, and it had an X on every day. And I said, well, what's this? And she said, well, this calendar represents the days that you drink. And I said, well, there's an X on every day. And she's like, yeah, you drink every day. Now, I didn't know it, but at the time, looking back on it, that doesn't qualify me for being an alcoholic. There are a lot of people I met that are daily drinkers. What qualifies me to be an alcoholic is two things. I have a physical allergy, something that takes place when I put alcohol in my body, and I can't control the amount I drink once I start to drink. And then I have an inability to stop and stay stopped on my own power. But I didn't know that at the time. And so that relationship crumbled, and maybe you guys were like me. I'm a tornado. I'm roaring my life through anyone that had the misfortune of coming anywhere near me. And I like to surround myself with women who were tornado chasers, right? They would like to chase their tornado around and watch the damage fly. And Yeah, it was a wild experience. Thank God for our Al-Anon members. Truly watch us bring hell to the doorstep. And so thank God for Al-Anon. So right around the time I'm skirting to the end, I have an experience with the Houston Police Department, and they separated me from alcohol and returned me to my parents' home, where I was locked in my parents' room, and I was checked into a treatment center the next day. And I still remember that really uncomfortable drive with my dad on the way to this corner in the first ward of Houston, Texas, where they sold certain types of goods that can't be bought in stores. And what we were doing was we were trying to track down my vehicle. And I remember on the way down, I had a pocket full of pawn tickets in my pocket. And maybe like many of y'all, I didn't own too much stuff. I'd been drinking and doing these other things for long enough to have separated myself from any type of way to earn legal money. And so what I would like to do is I'd like to pawn other people's stuff. And I had a pocket full of pawn tickets, and this was stuff that would belong to my dad. My dad's a hard-working man, and he never asked anyone for a handout. He went to work every day and worked hard for his money. And I had to code the streets with these guys that I ran the streets with that didn't apply to my family. See, I could look my family right in the face, and I was hips-looking cool enough to lie right to their face and steal from them while they were asleep, and then wander back into their lives and call them up when I needed them to bail me out of jail. Or they'd get a call from someone at 2:30 in the morning saying my car had been found and it possibly reported that I was missing or dead. And that's how hip I was, and that's how slick I was, and that's how cool I was. I didn't have that same code with my family that I did to my guys on the streets. And so we're driving to this treatment center. I got this pocket full of pawn tickets in my pocket. And I'll never forget the shame that happened when we got the man who was going to help me find my car in the car. And this man turns around and starts giving me the business. I mean, the business right in front of my dad. And I got these tears streaming down my face. And for a small amount of money, he took us to find my car. And we got to get that car. And that day I checked into a treatment center. And thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God there were men in that treatment center who were properly armed with the facts about themselves, who came to that center to carry the message of experience, strength, and hope. And they walked into that treatment center with big books in their hands. And they sat us down in a circle, and they looked us straight in the face, and they said, hey, guys, guess what? This is a great place to get separated from alcohol. But if you want to know a life like you've never known, and you want to know a freedom like you've never experienced, you're going to need to do what's in this book. And if you want something you've never had, you got to be willing to do something you've never done. And if that interests you, come talk to us after this meeting, because we have an answer for your drinking problem. And for some reason, on that day, perhaps out of desperation, perhaps out of being just dumb and young, that message sounded attractive to me. You see, for a long while, I had always wondered why I drank differently than my friends. I surrounded myself with a bunch of people that I thought drank just like me. But just like the book describes, ill health, change of environment, falling in love, warning of a doctor, those things became operative for many people that I drank with. And those people could stop or moderate on their own power. And they walked away from this life. And I was chained to it. Trapped within a trap that I could not spring. I could not think my way out of a drink. No matter what I put in front of me to say, you know what, if I drink, I'm going to lose this. Or if I drink, she's going to leave. Or if I drink, I'm not going to get an education. That stuff was easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that I could have just one. And I don't know about y'all, but that definition of doing the same thing over and over again never really fit my drinking. The big book seemed to describe what happened to me. It was more likened to the lack of proportion of the ability to think straight. And that's what happened with me in alcohol. There were many times when someone could put a loaded gun on the table, which at times looked like a solution to my drinking problem, and say, Stephen, now don't put that gun in your mouth. You put that in your mouth and pull the trigger, it's going to blow your brains out. And I had the proportion to think straight. But they put a bottle of vodka in front of me and said, don't put that in your mouth, it'll kill you. And for some reason, the subtle insanity that precedes the first drink, that threadbare idea that this time I'm going to handle myself like I never have before. And there would come that strange mental blank spot, and I'd pick that drink up and take one. I'd make the most insane decision of my life every time. I'd take a drink from the position of a stone cold sobriety and try another run at it. So I'm checking into this treatment center, and these guys sit me down and qualify me. They ask me two questions. Stephen, when you drink, does something take place inside of you? A phenomenon of craving, a thirst that you can't control. No matter how much alcohol you pour on top of it, does your thirst ever get quenched? And I said, no, it doesn't. I said, let me ask you another question. if when drinking, do you have little control over the amount you take? And I said, yeah, every single time I seem to set out to have just one 30-pack. And I end up drinking a gallon and a 30-pack, and 4 days later coming out of a blackout behind a dumpster with no pants, covered in vomit and in urine, wondering how I got there again. They said, well, let me ask you another question. When you go to stop, have you ever had any ability to stop and stay stopped on your own power for a given amount of time? And I said, no, I've never been able to stop drinking on my own. They said, well, you're probably alcoholic. You know what you need? I said, I have no idea. There's a lot of things that I need. And they said, Stephen, what you might need is a spiritual experience as a result of working the 12 steps of this program out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're recovered members of this program, and we'd like to show you what we did to have a spiritual experience. And for some reason, that sounded different to me. You see, that was different language. Like I said, I grew up with people telling me what to do, telling me how to do it, telling me not to do this, don't do that. And all of a sudden, here was a group of guys saying, Stephen, we're going to show you what we did. We're going to show you what we did to recover. If you're willing to take some suggestion and follow some direction and follow some instruction that we give you, we promise you a life beyond your wildest dreams. And so I surrendered in that treatment center, and I asked one of those guys to sponsor me, and thankfully, for me, my insurance kicked me out of there about 3 days later. And so thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous, and thank God for members of this program who are properly armed with the facts about themselves and carrying out that part of our 12th step, to carry the message to other alcoholics. You see, attraction, not promotion, is our public relations policy. That is not our 12-step philosophy. Our 12-step philosophy is we carry this message to the sick and suffering alcoholic who may never have had a copy of the Big Book set in front of them. They may have never seen what a recovered alcoholic looks like. Thankfully, I went and worked the steps with these guys, and we went to this house my grand sponsor had in Houston, Texas. And y'all, I hadn't done anything sober like a party in many years. But when I got to this house, it was going off. They had a little soda machine and a pool table and a pool in the backyard. And I saw people my age having a great time. And I looked around and I smelled some cups, and there was no booze. I was like, what's going on here? Y'all must be smoking a little of that something. And nope, nobody was doing that either. And right as when I thought I was going to get a chance to get into the middle of this party, my sponsor said, man, see that notebook and that pen and that book? That's you. You're going up in that upper room and you're going to write a 4-step. I'm going to show you how to do it. And don't come out until it's done. You're going to write 3 inventories. Whew. Did anyone remember their first 4-step? Yeah. Mine was like a confession. It was like 50 pages. You know, everything I'd ever done. And I'm just sweating and pouring over it. I mean, I was almost physically sick when I did it. And I thought, okay, then it's done. All 3 inventories: resentment, fear, conduct in my sexual arena. We're done. Now we get to party. He goes, nope, back upstairs. Now we're doing your 5th step. Damn. I never got to do anything that day except for get free of all the things that had kept me blocked off from everyone in this room and from God. See, I really had no idea what the effect that inventory had in store for me. But I know when I left that night, it was about a 4 or 5 hour process, I felt rocked. I had a headache beyond belief, worse than any hangover I ever had. And when I woke up the next day, I felt like I had been inwardly reorganized, as Bill said when he met Evie. Something inside of me had been inwardly reorganized, and my roots began to grasp a new soil. For some reason, the ideas, emotions, and attitudes which had been the guiding force of my life had been suddenly cast to one side. And a completely new set of conceptions began to dominate me. And what I did was, what they asked me to do was, make a list of the people that I had harmed based on my 4-step list, and then I began to go out and make amends. I began to try and clean up the wreckage of that tornado. I began to get in contact with and try and track down the people who had chased this tornado around and face them directly, making direct amends whenever possible. I came from a line of guys who believed direct amends means direct amends whenever possible. Not living amends, not I'll get to it when I feel like it, but no, you take an active role in your cleaning up the wreckage of your past. It's an effort to sweep away the debris accumulated on your effort to live life on your own power and run the show yourself. You go out and clean that stuff up. You know what happened, y'all? I started to rejoin the human race. I began to see the humanness in everyone. I began to connect with people on a different level. I began to feel okay in my own skin. But I wish I could tell you that from that day till this day now, I never took another drink. I never had to go back out and drink again, but that wouldn't be true. I'm 22 years old. I've gotten in this pocket of enthusiasm in Houston, Texas. I'm going to the Post Oak Club and a young people's meeting there, and I'm getting involved, and we're back at the hospital that I just got out of, and we're carrying the message to the guys. I'm part of this alumni group, and man, life is going good. And all of a sudden, you know how it is, I get a bright idea. Ooh, a flash of inspiration. You know what I need to do? I need to move to Austin. I need to connect with all my buddies that I went to high school with in Plano. And I start floating this idea around, and I get in touch with this guy. This guy actually gets in touch with me, a friend of mine that I knew in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in Houston, Texas. And this guy was reading some outside literature, and he was a little bit different than your average AA member. He's looking at like Neil Donald Walsh, and he's looking at the Celestine Prophecy, and he's looking at like Carlos Castaneda, and he's talking about things, Course in Miracles. And I'm like, wow, this is not conference-approved literature, dude. Don't come at me with this craziness, right? I'm a big book dude. I'm a step worker. I'm a big book thumper. I don't even know what you're talking about. So there'd been a little bit of distance between him and I, but he called me up one night and he had a conversation with me. And you know, sometimes you don't have the objectivity in the moment. You're subjected to the experience that you're having, and you're not aware of what that moment actually means. But looking back on it many years later, I would now find that in my belief that it was God trying to tap me on the shoulder and stop me from doing something that I was trying to get involved with self-will. And I was about to self-will myself into a place that he described to me on the phone. He said, Stephen, I've had a dream, I've had a vision that if you move to Austin, something awful, something terrible, something life-changing is going to happen, and it's going to be devastating to a lot of people. Not just you, but to a lot of people. Full of self-will, sleep at the wheel, sleepwalking through life, dreaming I'm awake. Even though I'm in the midst of a bunch of big book guys, I'm not really open to this message that God is sending me. So we're having this conversation, and I say, hey man, you know what's so funny about that? I've already put in my 2 weeks notice, and I've already quit my job. So this thing is happening, I'm moving. And he's begging me on the phone, please man, don't do this. And I said, yeah, I appreciate that, and I hung up. And I moved to Austin in August of 1998, and I got involved with an AA group there. I got a sponsor in Austin at this group, kind of a group of enthusiasts. But I'll be honest with you guys, the group that I was coming from in Houston was a little bit different than the group I connected with in Austin. The group I connected with in Austin, they were about, and I don't know if y'all were sober in 1997, in the 90s, some of y'all, there was a big emphasis on meeting making, right? I remember this very clearly. It was like meeting making. You got to make 3 meetings a day. If your butt falls off, take it to a meeting. You know, like there was a lot of emphasis on fellowship, and which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking meetings. I'm not knocking the fellowship. Huge part of my sobriety. But what I found was that for some reason my spirit was attracted to that different message of AA. I was hearing in the rooms. It wasn't really coming out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I was hearing a lot of talk in meetings, and it was starting to sound attractive. And so I kind of started to shy away from carrying the message and meditating every morning and praying all throughout the day. And I kind of started to slip back into some old ways of living and thinking. And October 18th of 1998, alcohol wasn't involved whatsoever. I caused an accident that killed my best friend. And he died right in front of me. And, you know, like I said, sometimes you get the objectivity looking back on a moment when you see that God is clearly trying to wake you up. God is clearly trying to offer you a way out. And in self-will, asleep to the will of God, you make a decision based on self that later puts someone else in a position to be hurt. And that was my experience. And so at the age of 23, I caused an accident that took the life of my best friend. And what takes place after this is I would like to tell you that it was as a result of the pain and suffering and the anguish and the outright insanity that pain caused his family and my family and a lot of other people. But what I know about the disease of alcoholism tells me different. What I know about the disease of alcoholism is that it begins to take shape in my spirit. And what happens over a period of time as I start to lose my connection with God and I start to work the steps backwards, no longer practicing principles in my affairs, no longer carrying the message, no longer practicing prayer and meditation, no longer taking a spot check inventory throughout the day, no longer willing to clean up the wreckage as I make it, no longer to take a look at the character defects and go to God and ask them to be removed, no longer being honest with you, the same honesty that I knew I had to have when I was 22, but now after this accident, I'm deeply ashamed and I'm keeping secrets. Secrets that are cutting me off from God and cutting me off from you. And now when it comes to taking an inventory, I'll take Nicole's inventory. I'll take your inventory. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, but don't talk to me about that. I am cut off and I am full of self. The book tells me that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble. I'm an extreme example of self when run riot, although I usually don't think so. And in a delusional state, cut off from God and cut off from everyone else, I'm going to go about making these arrangements. You know, the type that I want to stay put. The type that I want you to do, and I want you to act this way and this way. And I begin to try to arrange life to suit myself. Anyone ever been guilty of that? Yeah. I begin to arrange life to suit myself yet again. And now step 2, sanity. Sanity is me. I'm the power. And now I walk my way right back out of powerless over alcohol, life's unmanageable. And what I don't see coming is a long line of page 52. Years and years of living in the bedevilments. I began to have trouble with my personal relationships. Couldn't control my emotional nature. Prey to misery and depression. Couldn't make a living. I think in that 7-year period, I have about 45 different jobs. I'm either quitting them or getting fired. And when they're firing me, I'm walking out saying, you SOBs were going to rue the day you let me go. You know what's so funny about all those companies? They're still in business. They're sending people off in 401ks on vacations, benefit plans. The only thing they ever had wrong with me was this character defect, this employee right here. You know, and I had waves of misery and depression through those years. What I know now is that I fell under the delusion that I could treat my alcoholism by simply attending meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell under the delusion that sobriety treats alcoholism. And so just physically sober, abstinent from alcohol, dying in plain sight, screaming horrifying psychic pain every day of the week, I would make a meeting just in time to get in there and kind of vomit all over y'all, feel a little bit better, and go home. And wake up, and my eyes would open up, and I would just think, you sons of bitches aren't going to get me today. You see, it's me versus the world, and you guys aren't going to get me. Separated from the power, separated from the fellowship, no service to other people, no active work in the book. I'm just a guy who's in desperate need of a drink. And by the time I step up to the podium to pick up my 9-year chip, the relapse ended when I picked up a drink. The relapse began many years ago. The relapse began when I decided that I was going to take my will and my life back from God, disconnect myself from the power, and no longer practice this way of life. No longer do the things that treat my alcoholism, my spiritual illness, the thing that I pour alcohol on top of to treat. I don't know, maybe like y'all, the only thing that ever treated a life based completely on self-centeredness was alcohol. It's the only thing that relieved the horrifying psychic pain of looking at everyone in this world as my enemy, disconnected from everybody. And the only thing that treats a spiritual illness in my experience is the power of God. The fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous in this alcoholics experience will not treat alcoholism. Just attending meetings will not treat my alcoholism. But I didn't know this. I'm about to take a drink, and you could see it if you were an active member of this program and you're really working this thing like your life depends on it. Like you're a person who comes into the room to carry the message. You have a message to carry, experience, strength, and hope. You could see me walking around. I'm just a guy in the habit of not taking a drink one day at a time and making meetings. I pick up a drink, and the first time I drank, I said, you know what? No one has to know. I don't want to throw away this 9 years. So ashamed. And by 5 o'clock that same day, I put my car in B. Y'all know what B means? Bar. And I went to the bar. My last drunk lasted 3 years. And it's just like the book talks about. It just picked up exactly where it left off 9 years prior to that. The progressive nature of this illness. The aspect that gets worse and never better. In 30 days, I got thrown out of that apartment. In 30 more days, I'm living in hotels and motels. 30 more days, I'm living in my car. And then for the next 2 years, I lived in abandoned buildings and cardboard boxes in the woods, drinking myself into a stupor through Houston, through New Mexico, through San Antonio, back into Austin. I abandoned my children, I abandoned my family, and everyone and everything I loved fit in the bottom of that bottle. And I just kind of drug along the bottom. And eventually, I end up blacking out and passing out on some railroad tracks, and I woke up and that freight train was rolling over on top of me. I came out of that blackout with that train. And the noise to this day just scares me just to think about it, and I rolled just ever so slightly, and part of that train just hit me and threw me off the railroad tracks. I'd love to tell you all that was the last drink that I took. But I kept trolling along, coming in and out of AA meetings, too terrified to come in and get that relationship with God going, and too terrified to end up back on the streets. And so I was a guy that was in the habit of picking up a ton of Desire chips. I had a stack of them probably this big. Till eventually I started showing up at meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the men started meeting me at the door, and they started saying, "Hey buddy, you can't come in here. You're not here for anything real. And every time you're here, someone ends up missing some money. Someone ends up giving you a ride and getting themselves into trouble. Man, if you're not here to get sober, go find another meeting to go to, because we're sick of you here." I made my way to a clubhouse in Austin, Texas, at the ride of a friend. And as we're going there, I'd been lying to everyone in this fellowship, telling them I had 6 months and 7 months. And I'm walking in, picking up meetings, picking up chips. I didn't even have a day. I'm picking up a 30-day chip. So desperately wanted to keep this image of someone who was really trying to do this thing. Couldn't stop myself from taking my first drink no matter what I tried. They came and took my parental rights away from my daughter at the NA24 Club in Austin, Texas. They came and informed me that I was being sued for a rental car that I had been taken from my possession. And I'm going to this meeting, and I'm riding in the car with this guy, and to this day, I still don't know what happened, but I just blurted out, "Man, I'm lying to everyone in this room, and I don't know how to stay sober. I don't have a single day sober, dude, and I'm dying, and I need your help." And I remember clearly what he said to me. He said, "When you go into this room tonight, you say exactly what you said, and if God is in this meeting, if God exists in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, you will find your way to a treatment center. And if you don't, you can sleep somewhere else, because, man, you're not staying with me. If you can't get honest, don't worry about it." So I waited till the last minute. I said that, tears rolling down my face, and 2 days later, I got checked into a treatment center. I'd love to tell you all that I was surrendered. I got to that treatment center, and I thought I was surrendered, and I didn't do anything about this alcoholism. I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't start actively working the steps. I drank again. I came back to that treatment center a year later, and this time, yet again, by divine appointment, God sends a man with a book in his hand, properly armed with the facts about himself. I checked into that treatment center on a Monday, about noon. They kept telling me, "Man, wait till 4 o'clock. This speaker, he's coming. This dude's the real deal." And I'm like, "Man, what are you talking about?" He's like, "Man, he drives a white Hummer. He's got a Rolex watch. This dude's for real, man." He starts talking about that book. I was like, whoo, dang. I want a little something of what he has. That sounds amazing. And so 4 o'clock, this guy rolls in the treatment center, and just like clockwork, just like they predicted, the Hummer rolls up, and the gold Rolex is shining, and he walks in, and what I noticed about him right away is he walked up to everyone and shook everybody's hand. He bridged the gap between a recovered member and a new man. He was the hand of AA to every man he met that day. And he pulled us in that day with a vision. It wasn't a vision of hope. I've read the principles that are written about the steps. I've never seen him say the same thing. I've often seen the principle behind step 1 is hope. That is not what Dr. Bob's experience was. That is not what Dr. Silkworth's experience was. That's not what Bill Wilson's experience was. And that certainly was my experience, not my experience. The principle behind my first step was hopelessness. This man came and sat to this treatment center and gave me a fatal dose of alcoholism. He left no wiggle room. He didn't give me a key. He told me there is no way out. You will drink again. You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic, Stephen. The day, the time, and place is coming, you will drink again. And there will be nothing you can do about it on your own power. In order for you to become willing, you must completely surrender to this thing. Are you done for good and all, yes or no? If you're not, there's other men in this treatment center I can help. Do you still believe you have the power to choose whether or not you will drink again? No, I do not. Good, because there's other men who are just that much more hopeless, and I want to help them. So we began to work the steps from a position of absolute hopelessness, total defeat, complete surrender. I was able to see my truth in the first step like I hadn't before. I knew that there would be no way in which I would be able to work the steps from any other position than that first step truth had to be taken through the rest of the work. It had to set the foundation for everything that I did. So when we got to the second step, and I began to consider this analogy that Bill uses in the book as one of Freemasonry. Although Bill wasn't a Freemason, he used the analogy of stonework. Second step being the cornerstone. Now, if that cornerstone is not in place, if I still believe there's some human power that's going to relieve my alcoholism, if I believe there's some group of drunks that's going to relieve my alcoholism, I need to look at my own experience. My experience does not show me that. My experience shows me that this alcoholic, driven by fear, selfishness, self-seeking, and self-delusion, can run amok in a group of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have never met a group of drunks that I have not been able to push myself right through. And I looked in my experience and I saw no human power can relieve my alcoholism. My higher power cannot be a group of drunks. My higher power must be more powerful than every human being in this room. See, I have to form a relationship with that power on simple and understandable terms. The chapter We Agnostic describes two groups of people. The group of people on page 50 is a group of people who have gained access to and believe in the power of God. That power begins to form a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. That group of people has a new power, peace, happiness, a sense of direction that comes into their life after they soon wholeheartedly meet a few simple requirements. That group of people, the consciousness of the presence of God is the most important fact in the group of that people's lives, and that's the group I wanted to be a part of. So when we got to the third step, I understood this body of work like I'd never had before. You see, I'm 22 years old. I'm coming into this treatment center, and the sponsor I worked with, God bless the man, wonderful sponsor, and we had this beautiful spiritual experience, but I never really understood the root of my problem. I never knew that selfishness and self-centeredness is what I treat with alcohol. See, I pour alcohol on top of a selfish, self-centered, fear-driven, delusional way of thinking and living to where I can't live in my own skin and I become resentful at all the people that don't do life how I think I should do. I have a very limited, narrow perspective on how I think things need to go. Anyone can relate to that? Yeah. Convinced that out of, 8.5 billion people in the world, if they just called Stephen Root, I can answer all their problems. Just call me up, baby. I got all the answers. Here we go. I get into this management position, right? And so we're looking at this body of work in 60 through 63, and he says, now, Stephen, based on the evidence that you've given to me in all these meetings that we've had, you've basically been presenting evidence to me. You've wanted to take back your old job, running your own life on your own power. And based on the evidence that you presented to me, you're fired. You're fired for cause. You abandoned your children. You abandoned your family. You lied, cheated, and stole, and ripped and robbed your way through everyone you've ever met. And that's the best you do on your own power, without a drink in your hand. I don't know about y'all, but I never needed to drink alcohol to run my life into the ground. Never, not once. These things that we call character defects, these things we call old ideas, I use those to run my life completely into the ground. Because I begin to think that I'm God. So in the third step, I was fired and rehired in the same day. How often does that happen? Not too often. He said, now listen, this job, it's got a few simple requirements. You want to know about them? I said, sure. He said, check this out. Hereafter in this drama of life, God's going to direct it. You're just going to be the actor that shows up. Where you go, who you meet, where you live, where you work, none of your business. God's going to be in charge. How's that sound? Based on the evidence of what I had in front of me, the way that I showed up, drunk or sober, I said, I'll take that role. I'll take that role. Do the best I can with it. He said, how would you like to be empowered? How would you like to have agency? This principal power of God working in and through you, demonstrating through you what God can do. How does that sound? Wow. Amazing. How do we do that? One day at a time. One character defect at a time. One amends at a time. One 10-step at a time. One meditation, one prayer. One hand to another alcoholic at a time. That's how we do this thing. Slowly, surely, in God's hands. The only way my life has ever been manageable is when it's in the hands of God. That is it. And so I took this job that he offered me, and then he told me about the benefits package. Now, Stephen, once you start doing this line of work, you're going to become less and less interested in yourself. I don't know about that. I might not be much, but I'm all I think about. You know what I mean? What else is coming? Well, you know what? You might be interested in seeing where you can contribute. You might show up and stop being such a taker. See, I'm the guy showing up in AA meetings and I'm taking from everyone in the room. You got some money for me? You got a place for me to stay? Give me a chip. Give me a chair. Give me a ride. Give me. Stephen, why don't you show up to the next meeting and see what you can do to contribute? Why don't you stand by the door and shake the newcomer's hand? the guy that's vibrating out of his skin, can't imagine what it would be to go through one day without a drink in his hand. Why don't you grab that guy and pull him in and sit him down and talk to him? Tell him about this way of life that we got going on. I said, I'll take that job. I'll take that position. I took that third step, and what happened was, as a result of doing the next line of action that goes through with it, because it's just not enough to take that third step. You see, I got to launch out on a course of vigorous action. The next step of which is a personal house cleaning. I've never attempted it. Well, I had. My sponsor made it very clear to me, Stephen, you had a relapse. For those of you in the room who are confused, what I was told about a relapse is that if I've never read from the title page to 164, done everything the book asked me to do in the order it asked me to do it, with a sponsor, had a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps, and then gone out and carried the message of the alcoholic, then I've never recovered from the condition that I suffer from. So how could I have relapsed? But I had done those things, and I had had a relapse. And so when we began to work that position of inventory, it started to seem a little bit different. I was looking for areas of self, how self shows up, how it manifests, how it separates me from you, how it is that I so deeply identify with this condition that I'm never going to get free from it. And I'll tell you, that body of work was something I still to this day kind of rocked me. But my grant sponsor, a man named Mark Houston, my sponsor was a man named Charlie Parker. And what Mark used to tell us at the table when we sat with him in Austin, Texas, is he would say, now guys, you can't stay sober on a spiritual experience you had 17 years ago. And so what I sit here in front of you to tell you today is that I am still a deeply flawed, deeply disturbed guy that's really can still be in the habit of taking life back and trying to run the show myself. And over the last 17 years, there are a lot of situations that I've been involved with that I wished I had made different decisions, and I wished I had consulted God and called my sponsor. But man, at the end of the day, I am still deeply self-centered, and I can become separated from this power at the drop of a hat. Some of the things that separate me: relationships, money, power, prestige, the pursuit of things. Anyone ever guilty of running down and chasing down the things? The gifts of sobriety kind of pull you away from what got you there. I've been guilty of that before. And I was able to sit down with my children and my family and make face-to-face direct amends for those relationships that I abandoned, for those deep wounds that I caused in my family. You know what I stolen from my family that I still really have never given back was that emotional security that I robbed them from. A few years ago, have a call my parents annually on Christmas Eve, and I called 1 hour later than I did. And I'm sober 15 years, and my dad called me 30 minutes after I missed that call in a panic, in tears, still reliving those moments of me robbing him of that emotional security. 15 years of sobriety. Y'all, we really do make those people that love us pay a high price for our drinking. And still to this day, I'm making those types of amends. When I say I'm going to call, I call. When I say I'm going to come, I come. When I say I'm bringing the grandkids, I bring the grandkids. And it's just these little things, these seconds and inches that used to separate me from death. Now these seconds and inches, I work the steps now because I'm afraid, deathly afraid to lose my connection with God. I no longer work the steps from a position of I'm going to drink again. I work the steps from a position I'm going to lose my connection with God. And if I'm not connected with God, I'm disconnected from you. And if I'm disconnected from this fellowship, this thing that saved my life, people like you in this room, I'm walking out the door based on an unfit spiritual condition, and I'll put a drink in my hand tonight. That's just my experience. So thank God for rooms like this and for people like you that were here when I needed y'all. Here when I needed somewhere to land, a soft place to arrive. I've had the pleasure of kind of getting those guys to kind of show me how this life kind of works over time. And what I can tell y'all is that I do believe one of my spiritual teachers, she likes to talk about life being understood in 5-year increments. And now having 5, 10, 15-year increments, here you have some objectivity, you can look back. And I think she's right. One of my spiritual mentors, because when I see what I was really ready to surrender at 5 years, I now know that standard is not enough at 10 years. And the standard of surrender that's required at 15 years is not enough at 17 years. And so, to me, the process of staying directly connected to the power that I find in this room, in this fellowship, is the process of surrender. I don't find myself growing by adding things to my life. I find myself growing by subtracting the things that I believe worked for me last year that no longer serve me today. And so I continue to work inventory from a position of taking a look at these old ideas, these old belief systems, which usually show up in my third column. I'm usually still walking around deeply connected to ideas I have about how my pride needs to be handled, right? How y'all handle my self-esteem. You guys handle my security, my ambition, my personal relations, my sex relations. I'm still deeply connected to these old ideas. They kind of make up my fabric. They're old programming. What Alcoholics Anonymous does, it offers me an opportunity to take a look at these old belief systems and how character defects I use to bolster these belief systems. Y'all ever use dishonesty, selfishness, resentment, and fear to put up walls between you and anybody else? Man, I do it all the time. I keep saying, kind of joking to my buddy that, man, at 17 years, I think I should be a lot further along than I really am. You know? I think I should be a lot more spiritually awake than I actually am. But that's an old belief system that I had to get rid of. You know, to me, the problems that come now I look at as opportunities. Right? My old way of living, my old way of thinking, I think about all these painful situations. I think about all these challenges that God puts in front of me, or these deliberately manufactured situations of misery. As it turns out, I actually go out and deliberately manufacture my own misery. The book says that I'm to avoid it. Somehow I don't seem to have the power to do that a lot. I go out and deliberately manufacture my own misery. Now that I look at those things, I see those as opportunities. More so opportunities to grow. Not only grow closer to y'all, but grow closer to the God that I understand. Once I'm pretty certain that I've reached a plateau, it usually comes, here it comes, that pain, that painful, significant experience that's coming to wake me back up again. Recently, I had some really painful experiences behind some conduct that I exhibited in my relationship life. See, I was out there during COVID, operating under some old ideas, engaging in behaviors that I knew were objectionable to me, keeping secrets that I knew I should be talking to my sponsor about. But again, deeply identified with this condition of self, I'm out there trying to do what self does, which is get what I want and the hell with what everyone else has to go through as a result of that. And my sponsor was diagnosed with liver cancer, and he's undergoing different levels of care. And I remember I had this really painful experience around some of this conduct, and I had to shed all that recovered man armor that I had on. Does anyone ever walk around thinking, I'm the recovered man, I can't possibly tell the truth about this, it's going to really make me look bad? It's so crazy to think that we're trying to protect our image in Alcoholics Anonymous. Craziest place. But I fall under that delusion all the time. So I'm on this phone call, and my sponsor, 38 years of sobriety, deeply experienced in many sponsorship situations. I presented this thing to him, and he said, Stephen, I do not have a sponsor-made ready answer for that problem. Stumped a man with 38 years of sobriety. But it taught me a deeper lesson, that again, I'm going to human power trying to relieve my alcoholism. I'm looking for a human solution to my spiritual problem. Come on, guys. Where's the answer? Tell me what it is. I want it. Just give it to me. Send it to me. Email it to me. Text it to me, man. Give me the answer. And the answer's not coming until I surrender what it is that I'm holding on to. I elicit the grace from God by surrendering this thing that I'm holding on to. I elicit the grace from God by dropping these old ideas, by walking through the pain, by making these amends, by getting honest, by acquainting these people with these defects. That's not my first reaction. My first reaction is to run, to hide, to stay in shame and guilt. And God's saying, Stephen, get rid of the guilt, get rid of the shame, get rid of the old ideas, not serving you. Come to me naked, stand in front of me again and again and again and again, because this game is about surrender. Surrender who I think I am and where I think it all is, because the perspective I had at 5 years, not the perspective I have at 17 years. And who I think I am and what you guys think of me, none of that is my business. My job is to stay close to this power and perform this power's work well. And all that power ever asked me to do was stick my hand out and go be a messenger. Go be a servant to this program. That's it. No matter how hard I work at this thing, no matter what I do in this program, the highest level I'll ever get is that of a servant. I'm here to serve. What can I do to contribute? How can I live out the vision that Bill had in Towns Hospital? I don't know if y'all remember this, but Ebby's visiting Bill. This is before the book is written. This is before the steps are even committed to any type of paper. And he's with Bill, and he says, now, Bill, I promise you that when these things are done, you will enter upon a new relationship with your Creator. That you will have the elements of a way of living that solves all your problems. Belief in the power of God plus enough honesty, humility, and willingness to establish steps 1 through 9 and maintain steps 10 through 12, the essential order of things. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. Destruction of self-centeredness. And every day that I wake up and connect with this power and do my best to walk through this life, seeing what I can do to serve others, there's a little magic. There's a little less self-centeredness involved. So, I don't know. I thought I was on time. I might have gone over. Did I go over a little bit? A little bit? Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. I guess 5-7 minutes. I hope you guys won't hold that against me. Listen, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you everyone for welcoming me here. And that's all I got.